You want some candy?
This is why we no longer dig. Let me provide some context. I work at an Antarctic facility, and I've been doing this since the mid-90s. I've led and trained all groups since the 2000s. Our crew changes constantly. People leave in winter, and a new group arrives in spring. The incident I'm about to describe involves two individuals from one of these crews. At our Antarctic facility, we once had two engaged individuals named Frank and Jessica. They planned to marry after leaving the facility. Unfortunately, I wasn't present to witness this. A while back, we had a drilling site about 3 miles away, near Mackenzie Sea. Our goal was to understand the continent's history and properties. Frank shared the following with me. One day, he and Jessica visited the mining site to check progress. After parking their snowmobile, they went down for a routine check. Frank inspected the drill equipment when suddenly, Jessica exclaimed, Frank, what is that?" in an anxious tone. They discovered a massive creature buried in the ice. Though only its lower body was visible, they could tell it was white and enormous. "What in the world is that?" Frank wondered. In a split second, the creature thrashed, breaking through the ice and causing a wave to flood the facility. Despite the freezing temperature, Frank and Jessica ran so fast they couldn't grasp the situation. They reached the surface and the sea ice, but the rushing water split their ice chunk from the mainland, leaving them stranded. They called for a rescue helicopter using their satellite phones, following protocol. Hello, this is an SOS. Another researcher and I are stuck on a sea ice field in Mackenzie Bay. Our coordinates are, send help, please. Unfortunately, help would take a few hours. As they waited, they noticed a large object moving in the water, the creature from the cave. It circled their ice chunk for over 30 minutes. Suddenly, Jessica screamed in pain, and Frank found her with a barb embedded in her forearm. Despite Frank's efforts, Jessica's condition worsened rapidly. The creature returned, bit into her leg, and dragged her into the water. The rescue helicopter found Frank 2 hours later, but he was silent and distant. He returned to base that night as a mere shell of his former self. Before, Frank was funny and social, but now he was robotic and passionless. He only interacted with me, spending his time researching ancient creatures and documenting information in his journal. After hearing Frank's story, I shut down the mines. Still, I sent one more group to investigate the tunnel, finding it filled with frozen water. In the main room, we discovered a massive hole in the ice wall and dozens of unfamiliar animal bones. I share this story to emphasize that some things should remain undiscovered beneath us and never be excavated.
For the past few years, I've been leading a cult. I know it's not the most honorable profession, but I had my reasons. I initiated this cult a couple of years after graduating from college with a theater degree. It turned out to be a costly and seemingly useless investment. Trapped in dead-end jobs and burdened by student loans, I needed a quick way to make money. So, I decided to start a cult and deceive people out of their hard-earned cash. The initial pitch of my cult was centered around a fictional demon called Valakor, who, according to my concocted tale, would spare only the sinless when destroying the world. The key to salvation was for followers to give me, the self-proclaimed sin holder, all their money. I would sacrifice myself for their sins by taking everything valuable from them. It may sound ludicrous, but with a charismatic approach, people bought into it. Theatrical performances, including my writhing acts claiming Valakor spoke through me, sealed the deal. At first, the goal was to make quick money to pay off my student loans. However, fueled by greed and the intoxicating feeling of power, I took it further. I bought an apartment building for my cult, instructed them to find jobs, and collected their salaries to fund my extravagant lifestyle, expensive watches, and a separate mansion. Some might label it as scummy, but isn't it just a variation of what landlords do in the name of capitalism? I made sure my followers had basic necessities, even getting them vaccinated during the COVID era. Unlike infamous cult leaders, I didn't exploit or harm them physically or emotionally. My sole motivation was money, and after all, is that such a terrible pursuit? Every year around the summer solstice, I performed a ritual for my followers in an empty field, adding an extra layer of authenticity to our cult. This ritual involved chanting gibberish, claiming Valakor's message through me, and encouraging more financial contributions. It had been a simple routine, successful in milking my followers for a few extra bucks. This year, however, something unexpected occurred. A day or so before the solstice, I experimented with LSD for the first time. I had accumulated so much money that I decided to indulge in various drugs earlier in the year: crack, Special K, ecstasy, and finally LSD. The trip wasn't too intense, but it left a lasting impact. Arriving at the solstice a day after my LSD experience, I assumed my usual position as my follower recited nonsense from the summoning book. Engaging in my typical theatrics, I felt an abrupt shift. It seemed like my follower mispronounced a word, and then I began to fall. Descending into darkness, I landed on a cold stone floor, trapped in a hole. A minuscule pinprick of light above revealed the vast distance I had fallen. Below me, red eyes opened on the floor, one, then two, then countless. The entire floor was covered in eyes. Fissures on the walls transformed into mouths, 12 in total, 6 on each side, filled with stony fangs. Another, larger mouth appeared in front of me. Each mouth spoke a single word, different voices harmonizing, asking why I had awakened them and what I sought. The revelation of my sins followed. Claiming I spoke lies in the name of Valakor. Paralyzed with fear, I was ensnared by long tongues emerging from the mouths, securing my limbs. The central mouth announced the arrival of Valakor, declaring my body as the vessel for plague, war, famine, and death. Suddenly, I found myself back on the field, surrounded by followers. Covered in sweat, I rose to my feet and pretended nothing unusual had occurred. The experience lingered in my mind, but I convinced myself it was merely a side effect of the LSD. In the following days, I experienced gaps in my memory, realizing Valakor was manipulating my body. The entity planned to use me to orchestrate the end of the world, filling my mind with blueprints, plans for explosives, and caches of weapons. Attempting to warn authorities, I found myself unable to complete calls or emails before blacking out and reawakening in front of a mirror. Valakor taunted me, promising to bring about the apocalypse using my body. As the winter solstice approached, I grappled with the realization that I was powerless against Valakor's intentions. The world would soon face destruction, and I was nothing more than a tool, his tool. Valakor spoke through me, heralding a future of plague, war, famine, and death.